The rain had been falling since dawn, a thin mist curling over the cobblestone paths of Harvard Yard. Students hurried between classes, clutching their laptops against the cold drizzle. Inside the Emerson Hall lecture room, however, the air was thick not with moisture but with tension. Professor Nathaniel Mercer stood at the front of the room, chalk dust streaking the sleeve of his tweed jacket, the equation on the board sprawling like a living organism across 3 black panels. "This," he said, tapping the final symbol, "is the unsolved problem of harmonic convergence in nonlinear field theory. Every attempt so far has collapsed under its own contradiction. In short, impossible." He set down the chalk, turning toward the small audience of graduate students and visiting scholars. A faint smirk tugged at his lips, the kind that had made him both respected and resented in equal measure. He'd spent 2 decades at Harvard, challenging minds sharper than most would ever meet, and never once had anyone dared to contradict him outright. Except today, in the back row, a hand shot up. It was small. At first, Mercer assumed it was a trick of perspective, a grad student's younger sibling perhaps, mistakenly seated in a lecture meant for advanced researchers. But no, the hand belonged to a boy, barely 9, maybe 10 years old, sitting upright, eyes bright behind 2 large glasses. A mop of curly brown hair framed a face that seemed to hover between innocence and eerie concentration. "Yes," Mercer said, amused. "Do you have a question, young man?" The boy stood, his backpack still slung over one shoulder. "It's not impossible," he said quietly. The room fell silent. A few graduate students exchanged smirks. Someone muttered, "Oh, this'll be good." Mercer raised an eyebrow. "And what makes you say that?" The boy hesitated for a second, then walked down the aisle toward the blackboard. "Because you're looking at it wrong," he said. "You're trying to make the harmonics converge inside the field, but they're supposed to mirror it." The professor blinked. "Excuse me." Instead of answering, the boy picked up a piece of chalk. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice didn't. He erased a section of Mercer's equation and began writing, fluidly, confidently, with movements that didn't belong to a child still learning cursive. The symbols flowed like music, a rearrangement of familiar patterns, yet something new. For a full minute, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft scrape of chalk and the distant patter of rain against the old windows. Mercer leaned forward, squinting. The boy wasn't inventing nonsense, his logic had structure. The symmetry transformations, the harmonic reflections, everything obeyed mathematical sense. More than that, it was elegant. Finally, the boy stepped back, dusted his hands, and looked up at the board. "Now the convergence happens naturally," he said. "You don't force it, it balances itself." Mercer felt a twinge in his chest. He took the chalk, tracing one of the boy's lines, then another. He recognized the concept, an inversion principle he dismissed years ago as too unstable to hold. Yet here it was, stabilized through the boy's adjustment of one boundary term. He tried to find a flaw, something to dismiss it as coincidence or misunderstanding, but the numbers refused to misbehave. "What's your name, son?" he asked, his voice lower now. "Eli," the boy said. "Eli Carter." "Eli Carter," Mercer repeated, turning toward the audience. "Whose child is this?" A woman in the back, his mother, clearly, raised her hand awkwardly. "He just loves math," she said, half apologetic. "We were visiting Boston, and he begged me to bring him here. I thought maybe he could just listen quietly." No one was laughing anymore. A few students had pulled out their phones, snapping pictures of the board. Mercer stared at the equation again, then turned to the boy. "Do you understand what you've done here?" he asked. Eli shrugged. "It just looked wrong the way you had it. It's like when you try to balance a teeter-totter but you're sitting in the middle instead of the edge. You can't make it move that way." Mercer couldn't help but smile. Half disbelief, half awe. He'd spent 30 years trying to explain complex field relationships to doctoral students, yet this child had just reduced it to a playground analogy, and somehow made it make more sense. "Show me," Mercer said. "Go through it slowly." The boy did. He started from first principles, rewriting each section, explaining with words that seemed too simple for such deep ideas. Each step connected to the next as if he were revealing something that had always been there, hiding in plain sight. By the time he finished, the impossible problem wasn't just possible, It was solved in a way that felt almost inevitable. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Mercer stepped back, exhaling as though he'd been holding his breath for an hour. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said softly, "I think this young man just changed the conversation." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling until it filled the room. Eli looked startled, his ears turning red. He mumbled something to his mother, who hugged him tightly, tears glinting in her eyes. Mercer stood aside, watching as the boy's gaze darted between the faces of graduate students, journalists, and visiting scholars, none of whom could quite process what they had witnessed. Later, after the room had emptied, Mercer remained by the blackboard. The equations still glowed faintly under the harsh fluorescent lights. He copied them carefully into his notebook, double-checking each line. The logic held. The simplicity of it gnawed at him. It wasn't just that the boy had found an answer. He'd done it by seeing what no one else could. That sometimes, the problem isn't the problem, it's the way we're looking at it. Eli and his mother were waiting by the door. Mercer walked over, crouched to meet the boy's eyes. "You know, Eli," he said quietly, "most people spend their entire lives chasing a moment like the one you just had. Don't let anyone tell you that you just got lucky." Eli smiled faintly. "I just like figuring things out." Mercer nodded, then never stopped doing that. As they left, he looked back once more at the board. It struck him that the boy hadn't just solved an equation. He'd reminded everyone in that room of something they'd forgotten. That wonder and curiosity don't belong to universities or degrees. They belong to anyone who dares to ask why when everyone else has decided it can't be done. Outside, the rain had stopped. The yard glistened under the late afternoon light, and somewhere, a bell tower chimed the hour. Mercer lingered on the steps, the faint echo of chalk still ringing in his mind. He thought about his years of lectures, his endless insistence on rigor, precision, perfection, and how easily a 9-year-old had cut through it all with the clarity of play. He laughed quietly to himself. Maybe, he thought, genius isn't about knowing more, it's about remembering what it feels like to see something for the first time. Far down the path, Eli and his mother disappeared around a corner, the boy's voice carrying faintly through the autumn air. "Mom, do you think they'll really use my idea?" His mother squeezed his hand. "Maybe they will, but even if they don't, you showed them something important." "What's that?" "That sometimes, impossible just means no one's looked at it your way yet." Mercer smiled, repeating those words under his breath as he turned back toward the hall. The board would be wiped clean by morning, the students would return, and Harvard would continue as it always had. But something had shifted, something invisible yet irreversible. And though no one could quite name it, everyone who'd been there would remember that moment when a child, unburdened by fear of being wrong, reminded them all that discovery doesn't ask for permission.